fucking read. People, 5th of December, welcome to Newspaper Breakdown. I hope we've all had a weekend. There are protests going on outside for something. I don't know what, but I think one of the signs says honk for something. So you may hear honking outside. I can't stop it, protests and all of that. So we've got some news to go through as always. So Sunak, we'll start with him. He has continued the Tory tradition of defending freedoms by saying it is completely unacceptable that people are having their lives disrupted by a selfish minority who join illegal protests. With the Home Secretary, Swella Braverman, she has met with police chief constables to discuss the tactics used by the likes of Just Stop Oil. Sunak has said that the police were already being given new powers to clamp down on illegal protests and would have his full support in acting decisively to end the misery and disruption caused to ordinary families. Now, first point is, see how he's saying it. Ordinary families, a small minority, illegal and all of this. This is the continuation of the us versus them. It's all they've got at this point. It's how a lot of the major things have been happening. It's a nationalist trick. It's the us versus them. It's been what used throughout history for authoritarians, nationalists, fascism. Not saying that Sunak is fascist. What I'm saying is one of the major tricks used by the far right gaining power is for the us versus them. They're bad. They're disrupting you, the ordinary people, the good people, the God-fearing people. These are bad people. Where in reality, the majority of protests that are going on, look at Just Stop Oil. Like they're saying, hey, the world's dying. We need to do something about it. All those bastards. Also, this the rules that he's saying, the powers that he's talking about is the Police Crime Sentencing and Courts Bill that came in this year to give more power to the police, which is stupid. You shouldn't give them more power. And the majority of protests done right aren't meant to be there to make everyone comfortable. If you're going to do a protest, you have to disrupt. That's the fucking point of it. But you're going to go there, sit down there, have a cup of tea. No, that's not what's going to happen. You have to disrupt. That's the fucking point of it. And this is the thing, especially with the likes of Just Stop Oil. I've seen them interviewed a few times, and they're bad at it. They are really bad at it. There was one on Sky, where the Sky journalist kept on asking the same question over and over to this fucking child. Well, couldn't you do this other ways? You're doing it wrong. You see, you're doing this and it's not good, and people don't like it. If I was Just Stop Oil, my question would be, what else can I do? Because every other idea has been tried. Legislation's done nothing. The government will do something. No, they won't. Every possible thought, conception and idea since the 80s, Thatcher was aware of climate change and the need to do something. 30, 40 years we have had of trying to do something the right way, and it's never worked. So if everyone wants to say, Just Stop Oil are doing it wrong, they need to do different ways, come up with the alternative. Because from what I've seen, everything else has been done. Everything else has been done and everything else has failed. So what's next? This is all that is left. Tory party chairman Nadhim Zahawi, during an interview, has said that nurses should call off their strike and abandon their pay demands because it risked playing into the hands of Putin, as he wanted to fuel inflation in the West. This is batshit crazy. there is something evil about, since the Ukraine, since Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the massacre has started. There is something fundamentally evil at watching politicians in this country use the death of innocent people, the rape and torture and fucking murder of innocent people as a shield to defend against anything. We've seen it constantly over Partygate, over strikes, nurses, everything. It is, you can't be on Putin's side, whereas the continuation of a destruction of democracy, which is what this government has been doing and a lot of Western countries have been doing, that is working on Putin's side. Brexit was fucking Putin's side. That's what he wanted, a weaker Europe. It is absolutely disgusting to use the death of innocent people as a defence, and suggesting that some way Putin, what he wants is to fucking make sure that nurses don't get paid a fair amount. He's over there screaming at Ukraine, we will only stop the bombing once nurses learn their fucking place, you mad bastard. The Royal College of Nurses have said that the government ministers had thus far refused to open negotiations over an NHS pay deal, with union sources indicating that they would be willing to look at a sub-inflation offer. So this whole thing, nurses going on strike and thing, you've got government ministers, and this seemingly is the same for a lot of the strikes going on. Government ministers are not acting in good faith, trying to deal with these strikes. They want you to be against the strikers. Us versus them, put them into a corner. They're bad people. I'm the good person. Listen to the government. It's not right, but that is how they see that they're going to stop it. They're not going to deal in any form of good faith dealing with strikers. They're trying to make them into the bad guy so that Joe Bloggs down the street hates them. That's the plan. Michael Lockwood, who is the head of the police watchdog in England and Wales, has been forced to resign after becoming the subject of a criminal investigation. Satire. Amazing. Beautiful writing. Exquisite turn. Reality is beautiful when stuff like this happens. The investigation has only been described as being about a historical allegation. This is the police watchdog has had to resign for crime. Do they go, well, fuck it. I mean, if the watchdog is fucked, how are we ever going to do anything about the actual police? It's nigh on impossible. Beautiful. Over in the US, during a 3-day trial challenging Governor Ron DeSantis' suspension of State Attorney Andrew Warren, Warren's lawyers got to ask some of DeSantis' officials what woke meant. This is very interesting, as DeSantis is one of those Republican governors who use woke as a way to get bigots on side. They said that more generally, woke meant the belief there are systemic injustices in American society, and that people needed to address them. Now, listen to that one more time. More generally, woke meant the belief there are systemic injustices in American society, and people needed to address them. And this is meant to be an insult. That's what we should be doing constantly now. Every time that woke is mentioned, which is on a fucking 10-minute basis. Before getting into a discussion, a debate, and you should never debate on Twitter or Facebook or anything like that. Never debate anywhere where someone can do an emoji. That's a little rule for life you can take home with you. Ask them what they mean by woke, because the majority won't be able to answer, and if they can, it's going to be something like that. And if you find that to be disgusting and something you should fight against, someone who's trying for the betterment of society, then there's no hope for you anyway, is there? Gordon Brown and Keir Starmer have released a raft of new recommendations to transfer power away from Westminster. Good news, Westminster is a corrupt piece of waste in this entire country. It is a disgusting place. Including abolishing the House of Lords to replace with an elected second house of 200 representing the regions and nations of the UK. Fine. There is a lot more on all of this, but considering that all the proposals will be consulted on before being decided to go into the manifesto, it's pointless going in depth into this. Absolutely pointless, but it is interesting to see some of the ideas, like proposing new economic powers to English mayors, local authorities and devolved governments. This particular bit is an attempt by Labour to cut off the power and the arguments of the SNP for independence, by saying, well, we're going to be giving more powers, allowing people who vote for SNP to potentially vote for Labour to get more power instead of full-on independence. With regards to abolishing the House of Lords, yes, 100%, whoop, get rid of it. We are at a very weird part in the world where the House of Lords is at the moment seemingly the only place where our government is held to account, which isn't right, because you have to have a look at the people who are in the House of Lords, and we got like over 1,000 lords now. It's pointless. But they should not be the ones to hold the government to account. You can't have unelected people. That's why you need like the law. You know, judges are unelected. This is the law, isn't it? It's a difference. Myself, if I was to do a second house, my thoughts would be having people who are experts. I think one of the problems that we have with MPs, especially when you've got the secretaries, like the Housing Secretary, Justice Secretary, all of this, they're not experts in that particular field. So the Health Secretary is never a doctor or a nurse or has some experience in the NHS. You don't have a Justice Secretary who is a lawyer or anyone who remote confidence. I mean, our Attorney General under Boris Johnson was Suella Braverman, who only got QC after her name because she was made Attorney General. Doesn't seem competent, does it? Starmer also said that there's going to be no Brexit reversal, and there is no evidence to suggest that going into the single market or back into the single market was good for the economy. That's of course a lie. If you listen to people who are talking about this particular thing, there's two sides. Either Starmer, he's a constant liar, God, he tells no truth, it's terrible, unlike Jeremy Corbyn, who's a god, he's a god. And then you've got the other side who are saying, Starmer, look at him playing 5D chess. They're both wrong. Starmer is not a Tory cunt, he's just a cunt. As is everyone. New EU-funded study of 8,000 young people has found risky or criminal online behaviour is in danger of becoming normalised amongst the young. It found that 1 in 4 have tracked or trolled someone online, 1 in 8 have engaged in online harassment, 1 in 10 have engaged in hate speech or hacking, 1 in 5 have engaged in sexting, and 1 in 3 have engaged in digital piracy. 4 in 10 have watched porn. These findings have been pointed to a more male participation in risky or criminal behaviour, with nearly 3/4 compared to 65% of female. So not a massive difference with regards to male and female there. It's 75 to 65%, not a huge, not as big as you would have expected. You hear that constantly. Well, I'm in Dalston. If you live in London, the sirens are part of London's delightful sound. Just under half of participants engaged in behaviour that could be considered criminal, such as hacking, non-consensual sharing of intimate images, or money muling, where someone receives money from a third party and passes it on. We all are aware that although there are good points to the internet, it is going to be the end of us, and we are seeing that without protections, children are getting younger and younger into dangerous aspects of the internet. I mean, one thing I assume that the ones that are trolling other young people, because I can only imagine what it would be like to be trolled by a fucking 16-year-old. Christ on a bike, how pointless would that be? What you have to do, you've got the online safety bill coming in. It's back in the Commons today, I believe, and although that's far from perfect, as with everything that this government does, it is setting some movement forward for protection. Final story. More than 600 workers at housing and homelessness charity Shelter are beginning a fortnight of strike action over pay, coinciding with one of the busiest times of the year. The Unite Union said the 3% pay increase this year had left some staff unable to afford rent and worried about becoming homeless themselves. There is an irony of someone who works for a homeless charity not earning enough money for themselves to be able to pay rent. It is layers, absolute layers. This, of course, coinciding with postal, rail, nurse, other strikes as well. One of the major issues, as I say, 3% pay increase this year. You've got inflation of 14.2%. So that is a real term loss. That's how numbers work. We are going to see more strikes. Support them. That's what I would say, because people do deserve to earn enough to not be homeless. So I hope you've all, and I'll catch you tomorrow.